This phone has single-handedly turned my perspective of smartphone upgrades on its head, and I genuinely wasn't expecting this when I took the SIM card out of my OnePlus 12 and put it into this almost 7-year-old cut down smartphone. This has been my single primary smartphone for the last 4 or so weeks, so let's talk about that in perhaps my most important video this year. Right, so let's just address the elephant in the room. This is the iPhone XR, a phone that I personally ridiculed and that the smartphone enthusiast community certainly turned our noses up on back in 2018 when it was launched alongside the facelifted XS and XS Max. To say this phone was controversial is a massive understatement. It was lamented for its thick and ugly bezels, slightly higher than 720p IPS screen, single camera on the back, and all for a pretty steep price. The reason why I spent £95 of my own money to buy this thing off eBay is that when looking for the last iPhone to support the latest version of iOS, this is one of the models that came up. So even though this is coming up for 7 years old now, it still runs the latest operating system, so stuff like compatibility, security, feature set are all pretty much what you'd expect from a new iPhone, let alone an old one. It doesn't have everything, I don't think, but it gets the job done and it's compatible with all the new apps. My idea was, well, what's the most basic or oldest phone that you could get away with using as your main device? And I think I found it. So I spent 30 days using this and the results are honestly staggering. My initial concerns were with the battery life, the display and the cameras. We've improved a lot in those areas over the past, 7 years, and my OnePlus 12 is packed to the gills with specs. The high-end hardware, I thought going from one of the fastest phones around to, this old one could really be a problem. And actually this is only the 64GB version, so my OnePlus being 512GB was again another concern, being able to fit all of my apps on here, though to be totally honest I don't use that many applications. But then I loaded up all my apps, connected my Nothing Buds 2, my Garmin Fenix 7, I logged into all my social media applications, although that's again not that many, and so on, and the phone got really warm when I was installing all this, though that is to be expected when you're doing a lot in a short space of time with a phone this old. And then I started using it and I thought, okay, things take a little bit longer to load, but generally it's not awful. And then after a couple of days I just forgot that my OnePlus 12 existed. I forgot I was using an iPhone over an Android, though I must say I have gone back and forth iOS and Android so many times over the years, it's probably a bit easier for me to transition than some of the other people out there. It just sort of felt fine. The performance isn't great, but it's more than usable. My biggest concern now that I've used it, and it's probably because it only has 3 gigs of RAM, it just doesn't hold apps in memory all that well. So if you need to dip from one app into another and then back into that first one, the first one probably will have been flushed out of memory and you'll have to restart the application, which is a real pain in the butt. Had hindered me a couple of times, to be totally honest. And if you've watched my videos over the years, then you'll know that I find high refresh rate displays in smartphones largely pointless. That's coming from someone who has 3 144Hz displays on my sim rig, and then I've had a 240Hz gaming monitor for like the past 5 years. I basically just don't tell the difference between a 120, a 144 or a 60Hz on my phone. The resolution, again, not a huge worry because, quite frankly, I don't care all that much. Being an IPS LCD, there's not burn-in on my model. Now, the IPS LCDs aren't immune to burn-in, they just are less likely to have it over an OLED panel. And I was a little bit concerned about the display quality, but honestly, I never thought about it once. The display being a bit smaller was actually quite refreshing, and the whole phone is actually a little bit more, compact and lightweight compared to my OnePlus 12. I really do like that. Though, because the bezels are so big, it's not as small as it could be given the screen size on paper, if you know what I mean. Face ID was fine, I had no problems with it. It's definitely slower than Face ID these days, because my work phone is an iPhone 16, so yeah, I kind of noticed that, but it's not that bad. And sure, I had to use a lightning cable to charge it, but I suppose that wasn't quite as impactful as the actual charging speed itself. I was really worried about the lack of 100-watt charging because I have that on my OnePlus. And this tops up way longer than 30 minutes, about an hour to top up, I'd say. But honestly, once I got in the groove of charging it overnight when I go to bed, getting into the habit of plugging it in just before I go to sleep, that never became a problem. And I've never really used wireless charging, so I don't even know if this thing has wireless charging. Before we address the battery life, there are a few things that are worth mentioning. One, when I bought this phone with the original battery, I believe it's still in here, the health was 81%, which isn't amazing, but actually for how old the phone is, that's quite reasonable. And so, other battery health measurements are going to impact your battery life. I'm not saying I recommend going and buying one of these things, but it does play a massive part. And two, I am probably not your average smartphone user. I have my watch connected permanently, so that's kind of normal for sleep and fitness tracking. But I also spend most of my time in my office on my computer, and so I'm not glued to my phone all day. I use my cameras, my computer, and then my TV after work to watch, stuff on there. I consume absolutely zero short form media, be that shorts, TikTok, Reels. It's just never interested me. I might look young, I'm 26, I don't know, I still feel young, but I grew up watching documentaries that were like an hour long, and so short form media just never really appealed to me, to be honest. And with that all said, my iPhone XR gets me a full day of usage every time. However, instead of finishing the day with 50, maybe 60% in the tank, it's 5 to 10% in the tank. So there is a massive drop off in battery life, and that alone might be the thing that makes me switch back to my OnePlus 12. Not that this ever left me stranded, but I just didn't have the confidence in it. Now, maybe the biggest of all my concerns was going to this camera. I mean, I love cameras, I love taking photos, I love smartphone cameras. The OnePlus 12 cameras are some of my favorite ever put in a smartphone. So moving to a sensor under half the size and only one focal length really had me worried. I shoot a lot of my images at 3 times. But honestly, I didn't find it as bad as I thought I would. Now, I still can't continue with this because I use the 3 times camera constantly, and the XR's sensor cropped in at 3x just really cannot compete. But the actual image quality, the dynamic range, sharpness, detail, color, it was all better than I was expecting from a 7-year-old smartphone. Okay, 6.5 years, but almost 7. It's shockingly usable, and honestly, I think those who just aren't crazy shutterbugs could easily get away with a primary sensor like this. It was absolutely no bother, although it is worth mentioning, most of my photos were taken in good light. I never really took any dark photos. I've always been a proponent for keeping your stuff for longer, not upgrading just because the internet tells you to or because it's shiny, but extracting the most value from your devices. And this has managed to impact my already pretty changed perspective, because for most people, you could get away with a 5-year-old phone no problem. This being 6.5 years old, I do think for people outside the tech sphere, it'd still do a serviceable job if all you did was sort of call text and browse social media. I typically recommend buying last year's phone, but maybe I should just stop recommending that because it feels like you could go 3, 4, maybe 5 years and have absolutely no problem. Sure, this October it looks like Apple will officially stop supporting the XR with iOS upgrades, and so it's not something I'd necessarily recommend buying right now, but maybe more that you should go for a 12 Pro or something along those lines, and still get the software and security upgrades for another 2 years. My 30 days with the XR have been boringly straightforward with zero real issue, and this whole thing has changed my perspective on the smartphone landscape.